wind began its journey high upon the ancient peaks, where the stone was old and the starlight was pure. It did not start with a gust or a roar, but with a breath, a tiny sigh that stirred the dust of sleeping crags. In this quiet cradle of the world, the air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of stone and distant snow. The wind drifted slowly over the edges of the high cliffs, feeling the expanse of the dark valley spread out beneath it. The stars danced in silence, casting a pale, silver glow upon the snowfields that clung to the crevices of the summits. As the wind slid down the slopes, it gathered the quietness of the height, carrying the peace of the peaks down to the lower lands. It was a gentle traveler, seeking nothing but to move, to touch, and to soothe. It brushed past the frozen lichens and the hardy alpine flowers that closed their petals tightly against the chill, whispering a promise of soft nights and slow, dreamless slumber. Each step of its descent was a sigh of relief, a gradual softening of the mountain's cold grip, as it headed toward the forest. Beneath the high peaks lay the tree line, where the ancient pines stood as silent guardians of the mountain's edge. The wind entered the forest with a soft murmur, weaving between the heavy, dark needles that shivered in response. It brought with it the chill of the peaks, but as it brushed the lower branches, it warmed, absorbing the rich, earthy scent of sap, moss, and damp soil. The trees stood close together, their roots intertwined deep beneath the forest floor, sharing the strength of the earth. The wind spoke to them in a language of sighs, telling tales of the high, empty sky it had just left. The pines groaned softly, a comforting and rhythmic sound that echoed through the shadows like a slow heartbeat. The wind did not rush. It lingered in the boughs, rocking the smallest twigs and carrying the scent of pine needles down into the undergrowth. A blanket of soft moss covered the ground below, absorbing the whispers of the canopy and cushioning the world in a quiet green hush. In this sanctuary of shadows and needles, the wind felt at home, a visitor in a cathedral of wood. Deep in the heart of the pine forest, a wise old owl sat nestled within the hollow of an ancient birch tree. Its feathers were thick and soft, colored in shades of gray and brown that blended perfectly with the rough bark. The wind slid gently through the branches of the birch, brushing against the owl's soft feathers with a light touch. The owl closed its large, golden eyes, tilting its head to feel the cool caress of the night air. There was no need for flight tonight, for the forest was at peace, and the wind brought no warnings, only comfort. The wind whispered of the high peaks, and the owl listened in its silent way, its chest rising and falling in a steady, slow rhythm. The leaves of the birch tree shivered, making a sound like soft rain falling upon dry ground. The wind lingered for a moment, enjoying the stillness of the owl's perch, before it drifted further down the trunk, past the sleeping insects in the bark and the dormant ferns at the tree's base, carrying the owl's quiet wisdom with it. Emerging from the thick trees, the wind found a wide clearing where a quiet, mist-covered pond lay perfectly still. The surface of the water was like a dark mirror, reflecting the stars above and the crescent moon that hung in the sky. The wind blew softly across the water, creating tiny, gentle ripples that shimmered like silver threads in the dark. The mist above the pond danced, swirling into slow, elegant shapes as the wind guided it across the grassy banks. Reeds and cattails grew along the water's edge, bending their slender stalks in a slow, graceful bow as the breeze passed. The water lilies rested on the surface, their large green pads holding drops of morning dew that sparkled in the starlight. The wind inhaled the scent of sweet water, wet earth, and wild mint that grew near the bank. It was a place of deep rest, where the boundary between sky and earth seemed to dissolve in the quiet reflection. The wind lingered over the water, cooling itself, before rising again to seek the open fields. A soft, warm mist rose from the water to meet the cool breeze, wrapping the entire pond in a peaceful, protective shroud. Beyond the clearing, the land sloped gently down into a wide meadow filled with wild bluebells and sweet lavender. Under the dark night sky, the flowers were soft shades of purple and blue, their colors muted by the moonlight. The wind swept over the field, moving in long, slow waves that made the flowers look like a calm, purple sea. As it brushed past the petals, the wind gathered the sweet, soothing scent of lavender, carrying it along like a fragrant blanket. The perfume filled the air, heavy and rich, bringing a deep sense of calm to everything it touched. Tiny moths, white as snow, fluttered lazily among the lavender stalks, guided by the gentle flow of the breeze. The wind did not disturb their quiet dance, it only supported them, lifting them gently and then letting them rest. The earth beneath the flowers was warm, holding the heat of the sun that had set hours ago, releasing it slowly into the night air to mingle with the cool breeze, creating a perfect balance of warmth and chill. The earth beneath the lavender was warm and dry, holding the heat of the set sun and releasing it slowly to create a perfect, comforting climate. At the edge of the fragrant meadow, a small, winding stream flowed over smooth stones, its water clear and cool. The stream sang a soft song as it tumbled over the pebbles, a liquid lullaby that repeated in a soothing loop. The wind came down to the stream, brushing the surface of the water and mixing its sighs with the gurgling stream. It played with the willow branches that hung over the water, letting them dip their leaves into the cool current. Small fish rested in the quiet pools near the bank, their scales shining in the dark as the water moved over them. The wind carried the cool mist from the stream up into the air, spreading the freshness to the dry grass nearby. The moss-covered stones along the banks felt the damp touch of the breeze and grew cooler in the night. The stream and the wind moved together, two travelers going in the same direction, sharing their quiet paths. The wind followed the stream's twists and turns, finding a sense of direction in the water's gentle flow. It followed the stream's twists and turns, finding a sense of direction in the water's gentle flow and sharing its quiet path. The stream led the wind to an old stone bridge, its stones covered in dark green moss and ivy. The bridge had stood for 100 years, arching gracefully over the water, a solid and quiet monument to the past. The wind flew under the stone arch, where the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and old stone. It rustled the ivy leaves that hung down from the sides, making a soft clicking sound as they touched each other. The wind felt the strength of the old stones, which stood firm against the flow of the water and the passage of time. It lingered in the shadow of the bridge, resting in the cool darkness where the stars could not reach. The water beneath the arch was deep and quiet, a place of shadow and peace where the stream slowed its pace. The wind took a deep breath of the damp, cool air under the bridge, feeling a sense of history and quiet security, before climbing back up to the sunny grass and heading toward the orchards. The stone arch stood firm against the elements, a quiet reminder of history and safety that comforted the wind on its long journey. Across the bridge, a sleepy orchard of apple trees stood in neat rows, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. The trees were old, their bark rough and twisted, holding the stories of many seasons of sun and rain. The wind drifted into the orchard, weaving between the rows of trees and gently shaking the round, green apples. The leaves rustled with a sound like paper rubbing together, a dry and gentle whisper that filled the orchard. The scent of sweet, ripening apples and damp earth rose from the ground, carried by the breeze. Under one of the trees, a small rabbit lay curled in a nest of soft grass, its long ears flat against its back. The wind brushed over the rabbit's soft fur, bringing the scent of lavender and stream water to its nose. The rabbit twitched its whiskers in a dream, comfortable in the safety of the orchard. The wind moved slowly here, careful not to drop any fruit, only rocking the branches to sleep. A gentle warmth rose from the grass, and the wind nestled close to the ground, whispering a soft lullaby to the sleeping creature. Near the edge of the orchard, a wild garden of night-blooming jasmine grew over an old wooden fence. The small, white flowers opened only after the sun had set, releasing a sweet and powerful fragrance into the night. The wind eagerly embraced the jasmine, taking the rich scent into its heart and carrying it forward. The fence was weathered, its wood gray and soft, holding the vines of the jasmine close to its frame. The wind played with the white flowers, making them nod their heads in the dark like tiny stars. The scent of jasmine was thick and heavy, a natural perfume that brought a feeling of dreaminess and rest. A small moth, attracted by the scent, rested on a leaf, its wings quiet in the gentle breeze. The wind stayed in the garden for a long time, turning over the leaves and breathing in the sweet air, feeling the peace of the night-blooming flowers seep into its very essence, making it softer and warmer. The sweet perfume of the jasmine hung heavy in the air, wrapping the garden in a dreamlike shroud that encouraged deep, peaceful rest. The garden was next to an old, wooden farmhouse, its windows dark except for one where a candle burned low. The wind approached the house with a quiet whisper, sliding along the wooden walls and under the roof. It brushed past the window pane, where the glass was cool to the touch, and looked inside at the quiet room. Inside, the candle flame flickered slightly as the wind found a small crack in the window frame. The wind did not want to blow out the light, only to bring the fresh scent of jasmine and pine into the room. It touched the sleeping face of a child, who sighed and pulled the warm blanket closer. The wind felt the warmth of the home, a cozy contrast to the cool night air outside. It lingered on the porch, rocking the wooden swing with a soft creak that sounded like a slow lullaby, before moving away into the dark fields, leaving the farmhouse in its quiet peace. The wind felt the warm security that lived inside the stone walls, a cozy contrast to the cool night air outside the house. Leaving the house behind, the wind traveled to a wide, open meadow where a family of deer lay resting in the grass. The deer were still, their brown coats blending with the dark ground, their heads resting on their paws. The wind moved over them like a soft blanket, its touch light enough that the deer did not startle. The mother deer opened one dark eye, sensing the gentle movement of the air, and then closed it again, satisfied that all was safe. The wind brought the scent of the stream and the pine forest to them, a reassuring sign that the forest was quiet. The grass in the meadow was tall and soft, bending under the wind's weight like green silk. The air was calm, the silence of the night only broken by the slow breathing of the sleeping animals. The wind felt a deep sense of protection for these gentle creatures, and it wrapped them in its quiet flow, ensuring their rest remained undisturbed. The grass in the meadow was tall and soft, bending under the wind's weight like green silk, creating a perfect bed for the sleeping creatures. At the edge of the deer meadow stood a mighty oak tree, its trunk wide and its branches reaching high into the sky. This oak was the grandfather of the field, having seen 100 winters and summers. The wind climbed into the oak's canopy, rustling the thick, green leaves with a deep, dry whisper. It was a different sound than the pines, a fuller and richer sound that spoke of strength and age. The wind played in the oak's branches, swinging from twig to twig and carrying the small acorns down to the ground. A small bird's nest was tucked safely in a fork of the branches, the mother bird sitting quietly on her eggs. The wind brushed past the nest, making the leaves around it shake gently to create a protective screen. The oak tree stood firm, its deep roots holding the earth, while the wind danced in its crown, sharing the strength of the tree and the freedom of the air. The grand oak stood firm, its deep roots holding the earth, while the wind danced in its crown, sharing the strength of the tree. As the wind left the oak's embrace, it drifted toward a quiet, sleeping village nestled in the curve of the valley. The streets were empty, cobblestoned paths illuminated only by the soft glow of the stars. The wind blew gently down the main street, its breath rustling the hanging flower baskets on the shop fronts. It whispered through the signs of the closed shops, making them swing with a tiny, rhythmic creak. The air here was still and warm, holding the quiet of human dreams. The wind did not want to disturb the slumbering villagers. It moved with a soft and stealthy step, sliding under doors and around corners. It carried the fresh scents of oak leaves, meadow grass, and sweet jasmine, sharing the wild forest with the human world. It was a comforting visitor, a breath of clean air that swept through the sleeping village, ensuring the air remained fresh and light. The quiet houses stood side by side, their dark windows reflecting the starlight as the wind passed. The quiet houses stood side by side, their dark windows reflecting the starlight as the wind passed through the empty streets. In the center of the village square stood an old stone well, its wooden bucket resting quietly on the stone ledge. The wind circled the well, its breath whistling softly in the deep, dark opening. It was a cool and damp place, smelling of stone and fresh water deep below the earth. The wind played with the heavy hemp rope, making it sway slightly against the wooden frame. A sleeping pigeon was tucked under the small shingled roof of the well, its head hidden beneath its wing. The wind brushed the pigeon's soft, gray feathers with a gentle touch, ensuring it did not wake. The stone well stood as a symbol of life and community, now quiet and still under the night sky. The wind lingered around the stones, cooling its face on the damp moss that grew in the crevices. It felt the history of the many hands that had touched these stones, carrying their stories with it as it moved on. The stone well stood as a symbol of life and community, now quiet and still under the night sky, holding its secrets in the deep water. At the edge of the village square, a quiet rose garden lay beside an old stone chapel. The roses were in full bloom, their petals soft and red, pink, and white under the moonlight. The wind entered the garden with a delicate touch, careful not to shake any petals loose. It breathed in the rich, sweet scent of the roses, which was different from the jasmine and lavender it had carried before. The scent was clean, classic, and deeply relaxing. The wind played with the green leaves, making them click against the stone wall of the chapel. The chapel windows, made of colored glass, caught the faint starlight and glowed with a soft, warm light from within. The wind whispered a quiet prayer of peace to the garden, wrapping the flowers in a warm, protective embrace. The soil was cool and damp, holding the moisture of the evening. The wind felt a deep sense of sacred quiet in this garden, resting among the roses. The wind felt a deep sense of sacred quiet in this garden, resting among the roses and the ancient stone wall under the moon. On a weathered wooden fence that ran along the rose garden, a lazy tabby cat lay fast asleep. Its paws were tucked under its chest, and its long tail hung down, twitching slightly as it dreamed of chasing leaves. The wind slid softly along the fence, brushing against the cat's thick, orange and brown fur. The cat did not wake, it only purred a deep, low purr that vibrated through the wood of the fence. The wind felt the warmth of the sleeping animal, a small spark of life in the quiet night. It carried the scent of the roses and the old well to the cat's nose, giving it sweet dreams of the garden. The wind did not want to disturb this perfect moment of rest. It hovered over the cat for a moment, enjoying the steady, warm rhythm of its breathing, before sliding down the fence and moving out of the village toward the fields. The wind did not want to disturb this perfect moment of rest, so it hovered over the cat for a moment, enjoying the warm rhythm of its breathing. The wind left the village and entered a wide field of sleeping sunflowers, their large heads bowed toward the earth. During the day, they had followed the sun, but now they rested, their yellow petals folded in the dark. The wind moved through the tall stalks, making them sway in a slow, synchronized dance. The leaves rustled with a heavy, soft sound, like a giant blanket being shaken out. The wind felt the warmth of the soil below, which was still hot from the daytime sun. It brought the cool night air to the sunflowers, helping them recover from the day's heat. The field was vast, a sea of green and yellow that stretched to the horizon. The wind felt the scale of the earth here, moving in long, sweeping strides across the rows of plants. It was a place of growth and quiet preparation, the plants resting so they could face the sun again tomorrow. The field was vast, a sea of green and yellow that stretched to the horizon, and the wind moved in long, sweeping strides across the rows. Beyond the sunflowers, a deep, silent lake lay in the basin of the valley, surrounded by tall reeds. The water was so still it looked like glass, holding a perfect reflection of the night sky. The wind approached the lake with a soft sigh, sliding over the water without making a sound. It did not want to break the perfect reflection of the stars and the moon. The mist rose from the water's surface, forming thin, white ribbons that floated in the cool air. The wind guided these ribbons, weaving them into a delicate pattern that hung over the lake. The reeds along the shore stood as silent sentinels, their slender bodies motionless in the quiet night. The wind inhaled the clean, cool scent of the lake water, which refreshed its tired spirit. It was a place of absolute stillness, a mirror of the universe, where the wind felt small but connected to everything. The reeds along the shore stood as silent sentinels, and the wind inhaled the clean, cool scent of the lake water, which refreshed its spirit. On the other side of the lake stood a cozy stone cottage, its chimney releasing a thin thread of gray smoke. The wind climbed the hill to the cottage, sliding along the stone walls which were warm from the hearth inside. It smelled the scent of burning wood and sweet apples cooking on the stove. The wind brushed the window pane, where a warm, golden light shone from the kitchen. Inside, an old grandfather clock ticked in a steady, slow rhythm, a comforting sound that reached the wind through the glass. The wind whispered a soft song of comfort to the house, rocking the empty rocking chair on the porch. The chair creaked slowly, a rhythmic and peaceful sound that blended with the wind's sighs. The wind felt the safety and love that lived within the stone walls, a sanctuary of warmth in the cool night. It stayed on the porch for a while, resting in the golden light, before moving on. The wooden chair on the porch creaked slowly, a rhythmic and peaceful sound that blended with the wind's sighs and the ticking of the clock. From the cottage, the wind drifted down into a valley of barley, where the stalks stood tall and golden under the stars. The wind moved through the barley fields, creating long, slow ripples that looked like waves on a golden ocean. The sound was a soft, dry rustle, a soothing hiss that filled the valley with a gentle white noise. The wind felt the light weight of the grain heads, which were full and ready for harvest. It carried the dry, earthy scent of the grain forward, spreading it across the hills. A family of field mice slept in a nest of straw below, warm and safe from the night's chill. The wind did not disturb them, it only brushed the top of the stalks, ensuring their hiding place remained quiet. The valley was a place of abundance and peace, the earth sharing its riches with all who lived upon it. The wind moved with a sense of gratitude, enjoying the simple beauty of the field. A family of field mice slept in a nest of straw below, warm and safe from the night's chill, comforted by the dry, sweet scent of the grain. The wind climbed the steep hillside that rose from the barley valley, where the ground was covered in wild heather. The heather was a carpet of purple and pink, its small flowers holding a sweet, honey-like scent. The wind swept over the hill, its breath cooling the dry ground and lifting the sweet perfume into the sky. The starlight was bright here, far from the shadows of the valley trees. The wind felt a sense of freedom on the open slope, moving faster but still gently, without any force. It brushed past the rough stones and the low bushes, carrying the scent of the heather to the skies above. The night sky felt vast and close, a dome of dark blue filled with millions of sparkling stars. The wind felt like a bridge between the earth and the stars, carrying the sweet scent of the ground up to the heavens, and the peace of the heavens down to the earth. The night sky felt vast and close, a dome of dark blue filled with millions of sparkling stars that seemed to watch over the hills. At the bottom of the hill, a weeping willow tree stood near a quiet, spring-fed pond. Its long, slender branches hung down like green hair, touching the water's surface with their tips. The wind entered the willow's canopy, weaving through the thin leaves and making them dance. The branches swayed in a slow, circular motion, drawing ripples on the water. The wind played in the willow's hair, a gentle comb that untangled the leaves and set them free. The water below was cool and clear, the spring feeding it constant, fresh water. The wind felt the freshness of the place, the air clean and cool under the green dome of the tree. A sleepy frog rested on a mossy log near the bank, its throat moving slowly as it breathed. The wind did not disturb the frog, it only cooled the moss and the water, maintaining the quiet peace of the willow's home. A sleepy frog rested on a mossy log near the bank, its throat moving slowly as it breathed, enjoying the cool dampness of the willow's home. Not far from the willow pond, under the roots of a fallen pine, a sleepy badger was tucked into its warm, earthy den. The den was dark and dry, lined with soft leaves and dry grass. The wind did not enter the den, but it brushed past the opening, bringing the fresh scent of the pond and the willow leaves to the badger's nose. The badger snuggled deeper into its nest, its breathing slow and steady, a picture of perfect comfort. The wind felt the safety of the earth, which protected the sleeping animals from the cold and the dark. It whispered a song of security to the entrance of the den, ensuring no wild sounds would disturb the badger's rest. The roots of the fallen tree stood like a protective shield, and the wind respected this boundary, only offering a soft caress as it passed by on its journey. The roots of the fallen tree stood like a protective shield, and the wind respected this boundary, only offering a soft caress as it passed. The wind climbed again, leaving the lowlands and entering a forest of silver maples. The maples were beautiful in the dark, their leaves having a pale, silvery underside that caught the starlight. As the wind moved through the forest, the leaves turned over, making the canopy look like a sea of flashing silver light. The sound was a light, papery flutter, a quick and gentle rustle that filled the air. The wind felt the elegance of the maples, their branches flexible and strong. It danced among the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor below. The ground was covered in a soft layer of last year's leaves, which cushioned the wind's breath. The silver maples stood tall, a forest of stars on earth, and the wind felt a sense of magic here, a quiet wonder that made its journey feel special and full of hope. The ground was covered in a soft layer of last year's leaves, and the wind felt a sense of magic here, a quiet wonder that brought hope. Leaving the clover field, the wind traveled to a small meadow filled with white clover. Under the starlight, the tiny blossoms looked like small snowballs scattered on a green carpet. The wind swept low over the ground, its breath warm and gentle as it rustled the three-leaf clovers. It brought the sweet, green scent of the clover field along with it, mixing it with the silver maple scent from the forest. A small ladybug was tucked under a clover leaf, its red shell shiny in the dark. The wind hovered over the ladybug, creating a small pocket of warm air that kept it comfortable in the night. The field was quiet, the silence of the meadow a soft blanket that covered everything. The wind felt a sense of simplicity and peace here, the clover field offering a humble and beautiful place of rest. It moved slowly, enjoying the softness of the clover carpet and the clean, sweet air, before heading toward the sound of water. It moved slowly, enjoying the softness of the clover carpet and the clean, sweet air, before heading toward the sound of the stream. Following the scent of water, the wind came to an old wooden watermill built on the bank of a gentle river. The mill was silent, its machinery resting after a long day of grinding grain. The river moved slowly here, its deep water reflecting the dark silhouette of the mill house. The wind played around the wooden walls, its breath smelling of old wood, wet moss, and river silt. It rustled the ferns that grew in the crevices of the stone foundation, making them nod toward the water. A family of ducks slept near the bank, their heads tucked beneath their wings, floating gently in the quiet water near the mill wheel. The wind brushed their soft feathers, creating small ripples on the water around them that spread out and disappeared. The mill stood as a symbol of human labor and rest, a quiet giant sleeping beside the river, and the wind respected its silence. The ducks floated gently in the quiet water near the mill wheel, their feathers brushed by the wind as they drifted into deep dreams. The large wooden wheel of the watermill rested half in the water and half in the air, its boards covered in dark green algae. The wind circled the wheel, its breath whistling softly through the gaps in the wood. It made the wheel sway just a fraction of an inch, a tiny movement that made the old wood creak with a slow, sleepy groan. The sound was comforting, a reminder of the wheel's strength and its daily work. The wind carried the cool spray of the river water up into the air, spreading a refreshing mist over the grass near the mill. The river ran beneath the wheel, its constant flow a quiet murmur that filled the night. The wind stayed near the wheel, enjoying the cool dampness and the rhythmic sound of the water, before rising once again into the air and heading toward the hills. The river ran beneath the wheel, its constant flow a quiet murmur that filled the night, and the wind stayed near the water, cooling its face. The wind climbed the high hill that rose from the river valley, where the ruins of an old stone castle stood under the stars. The castle was ancient, its stone walls broken and covered in ivy, a monument to a time long gone. The wind entered the courtyard through a ruined archway, its breath whistling softly in the empty spaces. The stones were cold and rough, holding the memory of many centuries. The wind played with the wild ivy that hung from the walls, making the leaves click against the stone. In the center of the courtyard, a patch of wild bluebells grew among the fallen stones. The wind brushed over the flowers, making them nod their heads in the dark like tiny bells. The ruins were quiet and peaceful, a place where nature had reclaimed the work of humans, and the wind felt a deep sense of history and quiet beauty here. The ruins were quiet and peaceful, a place where nature had reclaimed the work of humans, and the wind felt a deep sense of history here. Weaving through the empty stone window frames of the castle, the wind looked out at the vast valley spread out below. The world was dark and still, a patchwork of fields and forests under a blanket of stars. The wind felt like a king on this high perch, looking over its peaceful kingdom. It did not want to rule, only to soothe and protect. It slid down the stone walls, its breath catching on the rough edges and creating a low, musical hum that echoed through the halls. The wind carried the scent of the old stone and the ivy down the hill, spreading the history of the castle to the valley below. A small mouse ran across a stone ledge, its tail twitching as it looked for seeds. The wind brushed past the mouse, a warm and gentle touch that did not startle the little creature, only offering a soft greeting in the dark. A small mouse ran across a stone ledge, its tail twitching as it looked for seeds, and the wind brushed past it with a warm, gentle touch. At the bottom of the castle hill, the wind entered a pine-scented valley where a small campfire was burning low. The fire was mostly red embers now, sending a thin column of warm smoke up into the cool night air. Near the fire, a family of campers lay fast asleep inside a large canvas tent, their sleeping bags warm and cozy. The wind approached the campsite gently, sliding around the tent and cooling the warm air near the fire. It smelled the scent of pine wood, roasted marshmallows, and damp earth. The wind did not want to disturb the campers, it only wanted to bring them the fresh scent of the castle ivy and the river water. It hovered over the red embers, making them glow a little brighter for a second, like tiny stars on the ground, before moving past the tent and heading toward the coast. The wind did not want to disturb the campers, it only wanted to bring them the fresh scent of the castle ivy and the river water. The wind brushed against the canvas of the tent, making it ripple with a soft, flapping sound that was like a gentle heartbeat. Inside, the campers slept soundly, their breathing slow and steady, comforted by the sound of the wind. The wind felt the warmth of the humans, a small oasis of life in the wild forest. It played with the leaves of the birch trees that grew near the campsite, making them whisper a slow lullaby. The night was peaceful, the forest a safe harbor for the travelers. The wind stayed near the tent for a moment, ensuring the campfire was safe and the air was fresh, before drifting away. It carried the warmth of the campfire with it, a small memory of human connection, as it headed toward the open horizon where the land met the sea. The night was peaceful, the forest a safe harbor for the travelers, and the wind stayed near the tent for a moment, ensuring the campfire was safe and the air was fresh before drifting away. As the wind traveled east, the trees grew smaller and the ground turned from soil to sand. The wind reached the coastal dunes, where the sand was white and cool under the moonlight. The dunes were covered in tall sea oats, their slender stalks holding golden seed heads. The wind moved through the sea oats, making them bend and draw circles in the sand with their leaves. The sound was a dry, soft hiss, a whisper of the sea that filled the air. The wind felt the grains of sand beneath its breath, a shifting and fluid landscape. It carried the salty scent of the ocean along with it, a fresh and sharp smell that woke its senses. A small crab rested near the base of a dune, its shell covered in sand. The wind brushed past the crab, a cool caress that did not disturb its rest, only offering the fresh scent of the pines. A small crab rested near the base of a dune, its shell covered in sand, and the wind brushed past the crab, a cool caress that did not disturb its rest. Beyond the dunes, the wide beach stretched out, where the waves of the ocean rolled in with a slow, rhythmic roar. The tide was coming in, the water dark and deep, with white foam sparkling on the edges of the waves. The wind flew over the water, its breath mixing with the salty spray and the cool ocean air. It played with the waves, lifting the foam and creating small, white caps that danced in the starlight. The sound of the waves was a constant, deep heartbeat, a natural lullaby that had played for millions of years. The wind felt the power and the scale of the sea, a vast expanse that stretched to the horizon. It did not fight the ocean, it only danced with it, sharing the freedom of the sky and the water. The wind stayed near the water, cooling its face, before rising to the cliffs. The wind felt the power and the scale of the sea, a vast expanse that stretched to the horizon, and it danced with the water in the starlight. On a high cliff overlooking the beach stood a white lighthouse, its tall tower reaching toward the stars. The lighthouse was a beacon of safety, its large light rotating in a slow, silent circle, casting a bright beam across the dark water. The wind climbed the cliff, sliding along the white tower and feeling the cool stone. It rose to the balcony that ran around the light room, where the air was strong and fresh. The wind played with the metal railing, making a low, musical ring as it passed. It looked out at the ocean, where the light beam touched the dark waves and revealed the white foam below. The lighthouse stood firm against the wind and the sea, a guardian of the coast. The wind felt a sense of purpose here, a partner in the work of keeping the sea safe and quiet. The lighthouse stood firm against the wind and the sea, a guardian of the coast, and the wind felt a sense of purpose as a partner in its work. The wind circled the glass lantern of the lighthouse, its breath cooling the hot glass where the light bulb burned bright. It watched the light rotate, a steady and silent rhythm that was like a heartbeat in the dark. The wind carried the light's promise of safety out to the sea, whispering it to any distant ships that might be navigating the night. The sky was clear, the stars bright and numerous, a silent audience to the lighthouse's dance. The wind felt the vastness of the sky here, the ocean below and the stars above. It lingered on the balcony, resting on the cold metal, before sliding down the cliff and heading toward the quiet harbor at the base of the hill. It carried the light's safety with it, a shield against the dark. It lingered on the balcony, resting on the cold metal, before sliding down the cliff and heading toward the quiet harbor at the base of the hill, carrying the light's safety with it. At the foot of the lighthouse cliff, a small fishing village nestled around a quiet harbor. The boats were tied to the wooden docks, their hulls rising and falling gently with the movement of the tide. The wind drifted into the harbor, sliding between the masts and making the rigging hum a soft, musical song. The air smelled of salt, old wood, and fish netting. The wind played with the ropes, making them tap against the metal masts with a slow, rhythmic click. A sleeping seagull sat on a wooden post, its head tucked beneath its wing. The wind brushed past the bird, its touch light enough that the bird did not move. The village was silent, the fishermen sleeping in their homes nearby. The wind felt the peace of the harbor, a place of safety and rest after a long journey on the sea. The village was silent, the fishermen sleeping in their homes nearby, and the wind felt the peace of the harbor, a place of safety and rest. Leaving the harbor, the wind drifted back inland, passing over a quiet, rolling field of sleeping wheat. The stalks were heavy and golden, bending their heads in a slow, rhythmic wave as the breeze passed over them. The sound was a soft, dry whisper, a comforting hiss that filled the empty valley like a warm blanket. The wind carried the scent of the salty sea and the old wooden docks, mixing it with the sweet, earthy smell of the wheat. The stars above danced in the clear sky, throwing tiny sparks of light onto the golden fields. A small family of field mice was curled up in a warm nest of straw near the ground, their tiny bodies tucked together for warmth. The wind did not want to disturb their sleep, it only brushed the top of the stalks, ensuring their hiding place remained safe and quiet in the dark night. The wheat field seemed to go on forever, a vast ocean of gold that slept under the dark blue sky, and the wind moved over it with a sense of peace and gratitude, enjoying the simple beauty of the land. From the wheat field, the wind entered a quiet forest of old birch trees and silver maples, where the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and moss. The leaves of the birches were paper-thin, rustling with a light, clean sound that was like soft rain falling on the ground. In a hollow beneath the roots of a large birch, a sleepy red fox was curled up in a tight circle, its bushy tail wrapped around its nose for warmth. The wind slid gently past the den, its breath light and soft against the fox's red fur. The fox did not wake, it only sighed a tiny, warm sigh, its breathing slow and steady in the quiet forest. The wind carried the sweet scent of the wheat and the ocean to the fox's den, giving it sweet dreams of the meadows. The forest was still, the trees standing like tall, silent guardians of the night, and the wind felt a deep sense of safety and comfort under their dark branches. The forest was still, the trees standing like tall, silent guardians of the night, and the wind felt a deep sense of safety under their dark branches. The wind left the forest and found a peaceful gravel pathway that wound its way through the hills toward a cozy stone cottage. The path was lined with smooth, white stones that shone in the starlight, guiding the wind on its way. The wind slid along the ground, its breath making the small leaves on the pathway roll and dance in the dark. It smelled the scent of sweet firewood and dry grass, a warm and inviting smell that came from the cottage. The cottage was old and beautiful, its stone walls covered in climbing green ivy that shivered in the breeze. A warm, golden light came from one of the windows, casting a soft glow onto the stone path. The wind approached the house with a quiet whisper, sliding along the walls and under the wooden roof, bringing the fresh scent of the birch forest and the wheat fields to the home. It was a place of comfort and love, a safe harbor in the wide, dark valley. It was a place of comfort and love, a safe harbor in the wide, dark valley, and the wind lingered on the porch, enjoying the quiet peace. In the garden of the cottage, a wild patch of lavender and rosemary grew beside a low stone wall. The flowers were closed for the night, their deep purple colors soft and beautiful under the pale moonlight. The wind entered the garden with a delicate touch, sliding between the stalks and gathering the rich, soothing scent of the herbs. The perfume was thick and warm, a natural sleep aid that filled the air and brought a deep sense of peace to everything it touched. The wind played with the ivy leaves that grew on the stone wall, making a soft clicking sound as they brushed against each other in the dark. The soil was warm, holding the heat of the daytime sun and releasing it slowly into the cool night air. The wind hovered over the garden, wrapping the flowers in a warm, protective embrace, feeling the simple and quiet beauty of the garden seep into its very breath. The wind hovered over the garden, wrapping the flowers in a warm, protective embrace, feeling the simple and quiet beauty of the herbs. Under a large lavender bush, a sleepy squirrel was curled up inside a hollow log, its tail wrapped around its head like a soft gray blanket. The log was dry and warm, lined with soft leaves and moss that the squirrel had gathered during the day. The wind did not enter the log, but it brushed past the opening, bringing the sweet scent of the lavender and the fresh birch leaves to the squirrel's nose. The squirrel twitched its ears in a dream, comfortable in the safety of its wooden home. The wind felt a deep sense of protection for the small creature, and it wrapped the log in its quiet flow, ensuring no wild sounds would disturb the squirrel's rest. The garden was silent, the stars above shining like tiny candles in the dark sky, and the wind moved with a slow and steady step, enjoying the quiet peace of the squirrel's resting place. The garden was silent, the stars above shining like tiny candles in the dark sky, and the wind moved with a slow and steady step, enjoying the peace. Near the hollow log stood a quiet stone bench, where someone had left a book open on the seat. The pages were white and clean, catching the starlight in the dark garden. The wind came down to the bench, its breath gently turning the pages of the book with a soft, paper rustle. It looked at the words on the page, which spoke of old adventures and distant lands, but now the book was resting, its stories waiting for the morning. The wind played with the corner of the pages, making them click softly against the stone bench. A small green leaf fell from a tree above, landing on the open book like a marker. The wind did not blow the leaf away, it left it there, a tiny gift from the forest. The stone bench was cool and smooth, holding the quiet of the night, and the wind lingered there, resting on the cold stone before rising once again. From the garden bench, the wind rose to the roof of the stone cottage, sliding along the warm chimney stones. The chimney was releasing a thin, lazy thread of gray smoke that smelled of sweet apple wood and cedar. The wind mixed with the smoke, carrying it up into the sky where it dissolved in the starlight. It whistled softly through the gaps in the stones, a low and musical sound that was like a sleepy song. Inside the cottage, the family slept under warm blankets, their dreams guided by the peaceful hum of the chimney. The wind felt the strength of the cottage, which had stood against many storms, now offering a safe and warm sanctuary for those within. The roof was cool, the wooden shingles holding the moisture of the evening. The wind rested on the roof for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, before drifting back down to the fields. The roof was cool, the wooden shingles holding the moisture of the evening, and the wind rested on the roof for a moment, listening to the house. Beyond the cottage garden, a wide meadow stretched out, where a large flock of sheep lay resting under a grand elm tree. The elm was ancient, its branches wide and its leaves thick, forming a green roof over the sleeping animals. The sheep were curled close together, a sea of soft, white wool that rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. The wind drifted into the meadow, moving over the flock like a warm blanket. Its touch was light and gentle, ensuring the sheep did not wake. The mother sheep opened one eye, sensing the fresh breeze, and then closed it again, comforted by the quiet night. The wind brought the scent of the lavender garden and the birch forest to them, a reassuring sign that the world was at peace. The tall grass in the meadow bent under the wind's weight like green silk, creating a soft mattress for the sleeping flock. The tall grass in the meadow bent under the wind's weight like green silk, creating a soft mattress for the sleeping flock under the elm tree. The wind brushed against the soft, thick wool of the sheep, carrying the comforting scent of sweet clover and dry grass. The wool was warm and dense, holding the heat of the animals and protecting them from the night's chill. The wind played in the wool, a gentle hand that stroked the sheep's backs and brought them deep, peaceful dreams. The sound of the wind in the meadow was a soft, sliding whisper, a lulling sound that repeated in a slow loop. The air was calm, the silence of the night only broken by the occasional soft sigh of a sleeping lamb. The wind felt a deep connection to these gentle creatures, wrapping them in its quiet flow and protecting their rest. The grand elm tree stood as a silent guardian above, its leaves rustling in a soft duet with the wind, creating a perfect sanctuary of peace and rest. The grand elm tree stood as a silent guardian above, its leaves rustling in a soft duet with the wind, creating a perfect sanctuary of peace. Leaving the meadow and the sheep, the wind rose higher into the sky, climbing towards the highest clouds that floated in the dark. The clouds were thin and white, like silver lace against the dark blue sky. The wind merged with the clouds, its breath guiding them in a slow, elegant dance across the moon. From this high perch, the wind could see the entire valley below, a quiet world sleeping under a blanket of stars. The forests, the fields, the village, the lake, and the cottage were all still, their outlines soft in the moonlight. The wind felt the scale of its journey, a long and beautiful path that had touched so many lives and brought so much peace. It was no longer a tiny sigh, it was a vast and gentle canopy of air that wrapped the entire world in a silent embrace, carrying the rest of the heavens to the earth. It was no longer a tiny sigh, it was a vast and gentle canopy of air that wrapped the entire world in a silent embrace under the moon. The wind spread itself across the sky, casting a peaceful shroud over the entire sleeping landscape. It filled the valley with a quiet, steady breath that was like the breathing of the earth itself. The stars shone through the thin clouds, their light soft and warm, casting a gentle glow on the fields and forests below. The wind whispered of the high peaks, the pine needles, the lavender fields, the old bridge, the stone cottage, and the sleeping sheep, sharing the peace of all these places with the wide world. The air was cool and clean, carrying the promise of a quiet night and a bright morning. The wind did not want to push or change anything, it only wanted to hold the world in its arms, ensuring that everything from the smallest ladybug to the grandest mountain felt the comfort of its presence and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The air was cool and clean, carrying the promise of a quiet night, ensuring that everything felt the comfort of its presence and fell asleep. Finally, the wind settled back down into the valley, its breath growing slower and softer until it was nothing but a whisper. It slid through the grass, brushed the sleeping flowers, and kissed the windows of the quiet farmhouse one last time. The whole world was asleep, a silent orchestra of dreams under the watchful stars. The wind found a soft cradle in the branches of the ancient oak tree, curling up among the leaves where the air was warm and still. It breathed its final, quiet sigh, a soft lullaby that faded into the silent night. The journey was complete, the land was at peace, and the wind itself closed its eyes, drifting into the deep, dark ocean of sleep. The stars continued their silent dance, the moon kept its watch, and the world rested, wrapped in the gentle whispers of the wind, safe and sound until the morning light.